Hello everyone. I wanted to make a video talking about the new Battlefield game, as I would like to consider myself a big fan of the series, and I'd like to see it do well, especially after all the controversies with Battlefield 5. I wanted to discuss what this new game could mean for DICE. I've been playing Battlefield games for years, but today I'm mostly going to be talking about Battlefield 1 and Battlefield 5, with some other games here and there. In this video, I'm mostly going to be focusing on the multiplayer, a couple of nods towards the single-player campaigns, as I know some people enjoy them too. I've put plenty of hours into all these games mentioned, maybe a little too much, so I'd like to compare differences between gunplay and variety throughout the franchise, and I think the only appropriate place to start is the game I put the most hours into, and is, without question, my favourite game out of them all. Battlefield 1. So unique in every way as no other AAA developer had gone back to this time period. And sure, I know it's not historically accurate in most ways, but I'm sure Trench Warfare Simulator would be pretty boring. Despite all the limited weaponry and vehicle selection for the time period, DICE did an excellent job of bringing the First World War into the spotlight, introducing millions of people to a mostly forgotten time period. I mean, who can forget that iconic trailer? Right off the bat, the hype for Battlefield 1 was through the roof, the game becoming the best-selling Battlefield title to date, even surpassing the sales of Battlefield 3 and 4. Despite its historical inaccuracies, that being the fact that everyone's running around with SMGs and LMGs instead of the bolt-action rifles they would have had, DICE still managed to make the atmosphere just right in all areas, where the game actually felt like a World War I game instead of some weird World War II spin-off. The vehicles driving around move and sound like their real-life counterparts. Artillery fire can pin you down in a trench as the enemy retreats, all the way down to the brutal hand-to-hand combat.
Da drüben, feindlicher Speer!
Another great thing DICE did to teach about historical events, battles, vehicles, and weapons was through the Codex entries. Battlefield 1's single-player war stories was very different to a full campaign following the same story the whole way through. Battlefield 1 instead opted to show all different areas of the war over 5 different stories, showing different fronts and roles in the war. One focusing on tank crews, one focusing on aircraft and pilots that flew them, even one in the desert against the Ottoman Empire. Most missions follow the typical Battlefield fashion, throwing you in there, straight into the combat, just shoot everything that moves until everyone's dead. But some missions can be done with a stealth approach. There's a good mix of both kinds of missions. Stealth can be a nice change of pace, and I know there's plenty of people out there who enjoy a much slower approach in games. In terms of multiplayer, weapons are pretty well balanced. For the most part. But even then, even powerful weapons such as those are still able to be beaten by something even as small as a pistol. So in my opinion, weapons are balanced well, as DICE had plenty of time to adjust the time to kill and the damage for most of the guns. When it comes to weapon variety, there are a total of 91 weapons to choose from, that being primary and secondary weapons, not counting the variants. Speaking of, the way to choose a gun depending on your playstyle comes down to the variant system, as customization would be pretty difficult in a game set in the Great War, as basically every rifle was equipped with basic iron sights, so the variant system is a good way to balance the limited amount of weapons that you have. Let's take the Gewehr 98 for example. We have 3 different variants: Infantry, Marksman, and Sniper. Infantry variant has the basic iron sights, best for close range engagements. Marksman rifle has a medium range scope. Sniper variant has a long range scope with up to 10 times zoom. It also comes equipped with a bipod if you want to sit back and pick people off from a distance. Another example would be the Selbstlader M1916. Factory variant comes with basic iron sights and less recoil than the others. Optical variant comes with a small kind of red dot sight, and the Marksman rifle comes with a medium range scope for longer engagements. One of this game's strong points is sniping. In fact, I'd go so far as to call Battlefield 1 sniping the best out of any game DICE has made. The Scout class in Battlefield 1 is my most used out of the main 4. But that's not to say there's no point in using the other classes. SMGs are controllable and dominate close quarter areas. They're not very good at longer ranges. The semi-automatic rifles of the medic class are great for medium range.
Erste Hilfe, Netzung!
LMGs for the support class are great at all distances, but in order to hit further targets, you'd probably want a bipod, which makes you an easier target for snipers. But going in too close would get swarmed by assault players with SMGs. So no matter what you use, there's always a weapon class that counters you, so there's not one class significantly more powerful than the others. The recoil on most guns is easy to handle, not too heavy, but not too weak, so you can always stay on target, but it still feels like you're using an actual gun instead of some kind of toy. With a total of 32 maps to play on, map design is pretty good. Some of my favourite maps include St. Quentin Scar, a beautiful French village, with surrounding areas blown to pieces by previous artillery barrages. Amiens, the French city, with small alleyways and narrow corridors through buildings, just a wall separating you from the streets that are crawling with tanks. Argonne Forest, tight choke points with grenades spammed from both sides, where anyone could be hiding among the trees waiting to dive out at the first sight of movement. And Empire's Edge, a beautiful castle along the coast of the Adriatic Sea, with naval gun emplacements and bunkers, with houses around the area getting destroyed in the midst of battle. The one thing that makes this game more replayable than other games such as Call of Duty is how much the map changes from start to finish. Craters from explosions, houses reduced to rubble, something you could have used for cover in a firefight could be completely gone when you come back later in the game, forcing you to use a different approach each time. Overall, Battlefield 1 is the game I've put the most hours into, had the most fun with, and keep coming back to. It truly is a game like no other, and I've had some amazing moments with mates when we all jump into a squad. And I can't lie, I'm really going to miss this game when it finally dies out, as it introduced me to some amazing people, taught us all so much about one of the most significant wars in human history. However, after the success of Battlefield 1, I was extremely excited when we found out the next game would be set in the Second World War, as DICE would have plenty more to experiment with and add into the game. So why don't we move on and talk about the next chapter in the Battlefield franchise. Battlefield 5, the so-called black sheep of the series. From the very beginning, this game was faced with backlash. The first being how much of a downgrade the trailer was compared to Battlefield 1, almost like scripted gameplay. But even then, the game looks nothing like it did in the trailer. The inclusion of women in the game was controversial, not so much for the fact that they were there, as I'm sure most people didn't really care. But it was how much it was jammed down our throats the whole time, and then the design director for Battlefield 5 basically told us that we were all wrong and he was on the right side of history, which is not a very good way to convince people to buy your game. But I want to move on from that, as I know it's been said 1,000 times before, so let's just talk about the game itself. We'll start off with the single player. Battlefield 5 used the same approach as Battlefield 1, with 4 different war stories, one set in North Africa, one in Norway, one in France, and even playing as the Germans in the final weeks of the war. The one thing about these stories that puts me off is how much they push stealth. Don't get me wrong, I know I said stealth is a nice change of pace sometimes, but Battlefield 5 pushes you to do it in most missions, and I know it's not mandatory, but the amount that they try and force you to do it, even for challenges, can be a bit annoying at times. In multiplayer, the way you choose a gun depending on your playstyle in this game is by the specializations tree. The more you use a gun, the more you level it up. The more levels you have, you can bring up to 4 different perks, such as improved accuracy, faster reloads, and extended magazines. And you can reset them at any time, as long as you've unlocked all 4 levels. Any sight preference comes down to the weapon customization. However, you're usually just limited to 3 or 4 different choices. The one thing that Battlefield 5 has that Battlefield 1 doesn't, and I'm hoping makes it into the next game, is weapon and character customization. It's not much, however, just choosing from preset skins and mashing them together. But it's still something. I hope it comes into Battlefield 2021 with greater detail, especially for weapons. With 83 weapons in total, there's a smaller selection than the previous title, which is a letdown, but I'll talk more about that later. Now, when we come to weapon balance in multiplayer, things get rough. Assault rifles and SMGs do so little damage that there's really no reason to use them, when all semi-automatic rifles are still a 3-shot kill. Medic, however, no longer has access to these weapons, instead getting SMGs and some bolt-action rifles. Assault class now gets the semi-automatic rifles as well as the standard assault rifles. Support still gets LMGs, but now gets shotguns instead of assault. The Scout class still gets bolt-action rifles, and even some semi-automatic rifles too. So you can see how this really messes things up compared to the previous game. Now let's talk about maps. There are a total of 20 maps in Battlefield 5. Some of my favourites for Battlefield 5 are Iwo Jima, one of the bloodiest battles of the whole war, with American soldiers landing on the beaches, fighting their way up the island, through the small caves all the way to the summit of Mount Suribachi. Narvik, a small Norwegian town suddenly caught in a heated battle between German and British forces. And Operation Underground, a twist to the classic map that started in Battlefield 3, reborn in a World War II setting, as a half-finished subway system underneath Germany. On the previous topic of the game having less weapons than Battlefield 1, I'm sure most of you already know, but I'm going to break it down anyways. In April of 2020, less than 2 years after the game came out, DICE announced they would not make any more content for the game, and instead just focus on the next game for 2021. There was mixed feedback to this, but mostly negative, as after the Pacific Theater was added, the game seemed to be making a comeback, and most players, including myself, were excited for a potential Eastern Front update in the future. But upon learning none of that was ever going to come, no Eastern Front, no D-Day landings, Battle of the Bulge, nothing. Battlefield 5 hasn't had a content update in over a year now, and the game has less content than all previous titles in the last decade, which makes it really hard to keep coming back to. And as much as I love historical settings, there's just not enough there. So for the moment, I think I'll stick with Battlefield 1. So now, we're up to the 2021 release of the next game, and to be honest, I'm feeling hopeful about what DICE has planned. I feel like they've learned from the mistakes of Battlefield 5, and that's why they even pulled support on Star Wars Battlefront 2, so they could get the whole DICE team working on Battlefield 2021, and with even more studios developing it than ever before, this could be the big redemption for Battlefield. DICE needs to get this right, as I don't think many people who stuck with them through Battlefield 5 are going to sit through something like that again. The future of the franchise is at stake here. If the next trailer isn't giving off the same hype levels as Battlefield 1's trailer, it's going to be a rough start. All we can do at this point is hope for the best, and hope that DICE really turns this around, or Battlefield as a whole could go under, and I don't want to see that happen. At the time of recording this, the reveal event is less than 12 hours away, and I have to say, I'm nervous. But I said it before and I will say it again. I feel like DICE learned and listened to the community, and they are ready to unveil the next generation of FPS games and take the whole world by storm. Hi everyone. I wanted to make this bit at the end of the video as a sort of to thank you for sticking around, for listening to what I had to say. It really, really means a lot. I really appreciate it. I know this is very different from the content that I normally put on this channel. I know I don't really upload much at all, but I just wanted to put my opinion out there on this, as I'm very passionate about the Battlefield series, and I really want it to continue. I don't want to see it die out. Whether you agreed with me or not, again, thank you for just sticking around and listening. At the time I'm recording this bit at the end, the reveal event is less than 6 hours away. So, I'm excited, and I can't wait to see what DICE has done. I feel like they are going to do a really good job, but who knows? I guess we just got to hope for the best at this point. Anyways, yeah, that's everything from me. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a lovely day, stay safe, and I will talk to you guys later.